Blackburn here, and welcome to our brand new video program, Resolving the Mindset Riddle, the 5 keys in how to work smarter instead of harder. And as the title says, this is all about mindset. We are going to do our best to deliver to you in 5 segments, the 5 keys in less than 5 minutes about how to live a better life, how to have more wealth, how to have more health, how to have more happiness, how to have better relationships. What are the keys? What are the tips, the tricks, the techniques that you need? Now, what's driving all of this is that I've been involved in the personal development field for 27 years, and during that entire time, what I've heard is very successful people in many, many different fields talking about the idea that mindset is the key to it all. So I wrote my book and it became a bestseller in the country, all that sort of stuff. What I've found is that that book's now 15 years old and I've had to update it, and the information coming to you in this series of videos is actually from the new book. And the concept I want to talk to you about today is a concept that I call the gap. Now basically what the gap means is that the time period between when we have an impulse and when we take an action on that impulse, the longer that time period is, then the greater your ability to take an action which is considered and which is thoughtful and which is more likely to get you the result that you want. So obvious examples of that are, if you just fly off when somebody says something, you just immediately respond. Perhaps you'll say something that you wish you hadn't, or perhaps you'll say something which is counterproductive, or perhaps you'll even say something which is not really what you meant. So the gap is my technical term, in reference to the idea that if you just took a breath and considered, should I respond? If so, how? When, under what circumstances, in what kind of way, that gap can produce massively improved results for you. So if you've got a bit of paper, just write impulse, draw a line, underneath that write in capital letters GAP, G-A-P, draw another line and then write action. Now really what I'm saying is if you draw an arrow between those two lines, the more you can extend that gap, in other words, the longer that time period, then the greater your emotional intelligence, which is actually the subject of another video. What I mean by that is that your ability to use your thinking to affect your feeling is massively improved. So I had a client years ago and I said to him, what is the gap between when you get the urge to eat and when you do eat? And he said, what gap? And I said, what do you mean? He said, well, when I get the urge to eat, I eat. Now, this guy's 130 kilos and can't understand why he can't lose the weight. Exercises really, really heavily in the gym. We're talking an hour to an hour and a half, 5 days a week. Doesn't apparently eat in an unusual manner. If you spend time with him, you don't see anything too unusual, doesn't overeat, that kind of stuff. But of course what he does is he eats very often and his system doesn't get a chance to get a break. So he went from using the gap, I said what you've got to do is just stop for a second. So you get the impulse to eat, you've got to say to yourself, am I really hungry? Drink a glass of water, and if the answer is still yes, well then you can eat. But what you might find is that you're like me. You see, I was a school teacher for 7 years, and every day at 10 to 12 they'd ring the bell for lunch, and we'd have lunch. Pretty innocent activity, pretty straightforward. You've got to organise an institution somehow. And so away we went. But the last year I was a school teacher was 1979, and yet to this day in 2011 I can still tell you when it's 10 to 12 because my stomach tells me that I'm hungry. Of course, the question that we should ask ourselves is, am I really hungry? Is it true that at 10 to 12 and every day of my life that I'm actually hungry, or is it that at 10 to 12 I get the sensation of being hungry? And if I have a glass of water, then what I notice is that quite often, if I ask myself the question, and I'm not saying I do that all the time, but if I ask myself the question, are you really hungry, then quite often the answer is no, I'm not. And therefore, I don't need to eat. In fact, the glass of water was enough. Obviously, this gap concept applied to pretty much any subject. When you're in the shop and you have the urge to buy something, perhaps the gap there is, should I? Do I need it? Is it important? How much do I want it? How much do I need it? What would be the benefits? What is the downside? So you grab the item, particularly the impulse buy, particularly the thing that you go, oh, I'd love one of those. Then, we get embroiled, particularly if the sales presentation has taken a while. So if you're in a computer shop and the computer's been in front of you for a while and you're falling more and more and more in love with it, then emotion rises, and we say emotions up, intelligence down. So, you know, the gap is to say to yourself, I need to go out and have a cup of coffee and think about this. Now, the reason for the cup of coffee is it lengthens the gap. If you just stand outside and count to 10, that's a different gap. But a cup of coffee is going to take you at least 10 minutes, so by the time they make it. So during that time, you can ask yourself, is this the best computer to buy? Do I need to buy now? Am I going to suffer if I don't buy? Am I just selling myself on this thing? Blah, 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 blah. The number of questions that you ask yourself will increase your emotional intelligence. It'll lengthen the gap. And the longer the gap, the greater your ability to be able to see a better move. And sometimes that gap needs to be a few days. So, you know, sometimes you're better off to make a promise of a purchase rather than a purchase. Sometimes you're better off to say, you know what, I want to leave this with you. I want you to hold the article for me for 24 hours or 48 hours, and I'll come back. And if you see me walk in the door, it's to tell you that I'm definitely going to buy, and you can wrap it and we'll be underway. Certainly when with your children, the gap is a powerful, powerful concept. So your homework between now and the next video, which will be a couple of days, maybe 2 or 3, then your homework is to see how many circumstances can you put the gap into in your life. Extend that. I'll see you in a couple of days.